Hello, everyone. This is Thomas Pepin, NHL Talk. I'm Thomas Pepin, and let's talk about the NHL. So today, it won't be essentially, I was going to say it won't be a recap, but it kind of will be. So I covered the trade deadline, trade deadline yesterday, live. And so I've gone over all the trades on a couple of occasions, and I'm not so much going to be speaking about trades today. I'm more going to be speaking about, um, well, kind of as the title indicates, just an outlook on the rest of the season given what's gone on during the trade deadline. So, or well, just prior to it as well. So, kind of to uh, give my predictions, I guess you could say, about what's going to happen given what's transpired prior to and during the trade deadline. Um, so that's the plan. I'm going to go through. I was debating on if I would go through all teams, but I think it's relevant, so I might as well go through all teams. Um, some will just be brief, simple discussions. So, like a team that has no chance of making the playoffs, I might just talk about uh, what their roster looks like now after their moves. Those should be very quick, but I'll maybe spend a bit more time on the teams that are either in a playoff spot or competing for a playoff spot. So that's the plan for today. And let's get started. Just give me one sec here. All right, so what we'll do. Actually, I should also. I should also bring up the standings here. And that'll help to guide the discussions. So we'll start with teams that are nowhere near a playoff spot. And so essentially that's going to be Philly, Montreal, Columbus. And we'll also do the Western Conference too. So St. Louis down to Chicago. It's that certain in the Western Conference already who has a shot at making the playoffs. 6 teams are basically just no chance. Pretty funny. But anyways, of course you never know because if St. Louis wins 20 games straight, that puts them at 99 points. Are they going to win 20 games straight? Probably not. But anyways, so we'll start with the East. We'll go from bottom up. So Columbus. Actually, I'll just pull them all up at once and then. So Columbus, Montreal, Philly. Columbus, Montreal, Philly. All right, so they do have it here. That's helpful. So their trades, they got rid of Nyquist, got a 5th, so that weakens their team. Although Nyquist was pending UFA yet. So a 5th round pick, not really of much value. First and a third for picks. Both those players were UFAs, I believe. Yeah. So some more picks, and quick they traded away as well. Gilly's he's a goalie, yeah. UFA, and Hutchinson, I believe, is a UFA as well at the end. So they picked up, Columbus picked up nothing long term. They just got picks, basically. And so, so they have a lot of space. So let's see what they have here. So for next year, they have 40. Is there a way that it totals somewhere? No. So they have 45, 50, 53, 62. So about 62 million of their cap is allocated for next year. So they got some cap space, but so I mean, in that regard, maybe if they're gonna sign some people, they can put together a decent roster. But yeah, don't know about that for Columbus. So not really much to report, except that they have some space where they could maybe fill out a good roster because they have some good pieces there. But that's. Oh, hey Sniper, nice to see you again. Just noticed your message there. Yeah. So, anyways, Columbus. At least for next year, maybe they could have a decent roster if they fill out the rest of their cap space, but it doesn't look too promising for Columbus. Montreal, I don't think they made any trades really. So they have Guryanov, and the one thing I recognized afterwards is that he has RFA status, so that'll be good for them. I mean, to have an NHL player on their team because they're struggling. Outside of that, they got a fifth, and that's about it really. So not much happened for them. Next year, they're going to have 46, 51, 57, 58, 59, maybe 60 some odd million of cap spending, so they'll have space, but again, it's not really all that great of a roster. And if they filled it all out, it's probably not going to be all that competitive. But anyways, this year not going to make the playoffs, so not really much to report as well. Philly, there was talks about moving Provorov, but he has term left, so I mean they didn't need to. Van Riemsdyk they should have, so that was a bad call. But next year, 24, so 44, 49, 59, 68 million. Wait, and then Ellis 68 is 74 million in spending for next year. And they didn't really make any trades either, I don't believe. Nothing of significance. So, I mean, their outlook doesn't really change that much. Well, especially not this year. So not much to report on Philly. Move over to the West. We've got St. Louis, Vancouver, Arizona, St. Louis, Vancouver. Vancouver, Arizona, Anaheim, San Jose, Chicago. Anaheim, San Jose, Chicago. So mostly picks, a few roster players, but nothing of great significance comes into St. Louis. I do like this Dean pickup though. So yeah, and then next year 40, 69, 76, about 76 million. Their cap eaten up, and and their team hasn't changed really. So that's if St. Louis didn't do good this year, it doesn't look so good next year either. But yeah. So again, this year they're not going to make the playoffs, so not much to report. Vancouver. Some picks. I like the Hronik pickup. Otherwise, some picks, not really too many changes. Next year, 59, 64, 71. Oh, wait, 76, 79. Jeez, they're almost up to cap, and their team hasn't hasn't changed really. So Vancouver, another team, not looking too good for next year, and of course this year not going to make the playoffs. Arizona. Arizona, where are you? Here. Okay, so Arizona has some picks, more picks, and picks. So, and you can see, if you take a look at all the picks here, yikes. I mean, their franchise is in a major hurt. So they have 26, 34, 37, 37 spent on roster players. 37 million, that's it, spent on roster players, and the rest are all IR people that are probably not going to play. Yikes. Not a good franchise, not looking good for Arizona, and they're definitely not making the playoffs this year. Anaheim. What did they pick up here? So, couple picks, and that's about it. So not much from them. 22, 30, 36, 42, 43. 43 million eaten up of their cap, so lots of space, and I mean the team's not that great. So not looking too good for next year for Anaheim. San Jose. Okay, so picks. That New Jersey trade is change their franchise in a noticeable way. It's I think in the long run that I'm gonna like that trade for San Jose. Of course, you never know how it's actually gonna pan out, but um, yeah, I like what they did there. That's a in the long run kind of thing. So like 3, 5 years down the line, maybe even further. So they are rebuilding, which is a good sign for them. Otherwise, some picks, and more picks. So San Jose next year probably not going to be any good either. 30, 56, 63, about 63 million in cap spending. So they've got some space, and the roster's not that bad. So if they were able to pick up people in free agency, they could, in theory, be a competitive team, or at least relatively competitive. Um, so their outlook isn't that bad. So it's not that bad. Again, not making the playoffs this year, but of all the teams that we've kind of looked at, they're one of the teams that aren't that. Yeah, they're not in so much of a hurt right now. Chicago picks, 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 and that's about it. Not really much. Lots of expiring contracts soon, so not so good maybe. I don't know. Depends on if you like the players, but what do we got? So they only have 13 million for forwards for spending next year. 13, 31, 35, 36 million in cap spending. Another team that's going to be in a whole lot of hurt. Yikes. Chicago's like in the same kind of boat as Arizona, but actually, I want to contrast this year because that looks neat to compare. So look at this. Just compare Arizona's picks. They're all second, third round for the most part. Not outside of the ordinary for first round picks. It's all second, thirds. But look at Chicago, what they have. A lot of first round picks and second round picks in there too. So Chicago, of anybody, has a better shot at turning around. Arizona, man, they're in a lot of hurt, and they're probably still going to be in a lot of hurt. So yikes for them. But not so bad for Chicago, it looks like, at least in concept to rebuild with their first overall picks there. So anyway, so that's all the non-playoff potential teams. And then next we'll go through some of the bubble teams in the East. So Detroit, Washington, Florida. Detroit, Washington. Where's Florida? Ottawa and Buffalo. Where's Ottawa? And Buffalo. And I think I'm going to move this over here so that we can see the standings at the same time. There we go. So you should see most of the teams. Yeah, I think you can see most of the teams there. So we'll start with Detroit. Yeah, you can see it all. So, um, Detroit made some weird moves as far as I'm concerned. They got rid of some roster players, and they were at least, in the running to make the playoffs. It looks like Yzerman thinks if they can make it, great, but if they can't, no big deal. So he didn't really go out and try to bring in anybody. And if anything, got rid of pieces. So more of a long term outlook, which is probably smart, but you know, clearly not going for it, I think, or at least I would argue. So mostly pieces out. So let's see here. Hronek goes out, got some picks. Bertuzzi goes out, picks. Verana goes out, pick. Sundqvist goes out, pick. So no ads. So like I said, it clearly demonstrates that Yzerman's not trying to do anything to help them make the playoffs. Just whatever happens, happens. And like I said, more of a long-term outlook. So if I had to take a guess, Detroit's probably going to be on the outside. And I mean, if they move up in the standings, they might be close to the playoff spot, but I very strongly doubt they're going to make the playoffs given what they did. So that's my thoughts on it. Otherwise, for next year, 29, 41, 45, 46, 47 million or so eaten up. And I mean, considering they were so competitive this year, and what amount did I say? I said 47. That's 41, 46, 47-ish. Yeah. So lots of cap space for next year. So the fact that they were so competitive this year and have so much cap space next year, I wonder what Yzerman's going to do in the offseason. You never know. He could do a lot of ads to improve the roster, and they could be into the playoffs for all the foreseeable future starting next season, depending on what they do in the offseason. So long-term outlook good. This year, it seems very unlikely they're going to make the playoffs, but good attempt at least for the most part this season. I think they did a lot with not so much, so good job for them. Washington's a weird case here, so they didn't do much, so they're not really pushing to try to make the playoffs in terms of like picking up assets and stuff. So Craig Smith, I mean, minorly impactful, but mostly draft picks. A third round pick, Sandin. It's slight, at least on a short term basis, maybe a slight downgrade in defense. And then they get rid of Eller and pick up a pick. So they're not adding. It doesn't look like they're really expecting to make the playoffs, or they're just going to go with what they have. So yeah, so I mean, short term, I don't see them making the playoffs either. They're within reach, but 4 points behind the Islanders with a game in hand. So they're well within reach. They have other people in between them and that spot, and all of them have a shot at it as well. So, but clearly Washington's not, confident that they'll make the playoffs, and they're not really pushing for it either. So, if you're a Capitals fan, that might be kind of upset by what's gone on prior to the trade deadline, and yeah. So we'll see. I mean, they have a shot, I think, of making the playoffs, but it seems unlikely given what's between them and the fact that they didn't do any ads. But so for next year, that is 60, 66, 74 million in cap spending approximately. Similar team. So I would say next season they probably have the same shot at making the playoffs. I think they've got a good shot next season, and I believe they have a shot this season. So we'll see what happens with Washington, but yeah, they're going to be one of those bubble teams unless they do some adds to their roster. So yeah, but a better shot than Detroit, that's for sure, to make the playoffs. Florida. So Florida, they picked up. Oh, that's last year. So they've done nothing. Florida's done nothing. Okay. So they go from being, what, the best team in the league or something like that last year to outside looking in, no additions. They're confident that their team's good, I guess. I don't know. Don't know what to think about Florida. This season, they're within reach again, just like Washington, and I would put them in the exact same boat as Washington. Both have a relatively decent shot at pushing for a playoff spot, whether or not they'll get there, because it's really everybody competing for those two wildcard spots. The spots above that, they're kind of a lock. So who's going to be the two teams that make the wildcard spot? I don't think Detroit, Washington, Florida, maybe. And then we'll consider the other ones next. But so for next year, 42, 56, 66, 70, 71 million in cap spending. So they've got some space to make some additions. I'd say basically the exact same boat as Washington. Could just be an off year. Could do well next year. Who knows? Yeah, so they have a shot at making the playoffs, but it's hard to say since they're on the outside looking in right now. So Ottawa. So Ottawa picked up Gauthier, 7th. Got rid of Zaitsev. Picked up Chychrun, picked up Brown, but I think Brown's injured long term, isn't he? No, apparently clear to play. Yeah, I thought he was injured. Anyways, so I guess that's an addition then too. So they made additions. It looks like they're still giving it a shot to make the playoffs. So they've got 3 games in hand. They're behind 4 points from the Islanders. So if they win all 3 games, then they pass the Islanders there. So they got a shot. Uh, and I mean, they made additions, so their teams actually improved. And so I would say, they got a decent shot. Now the problem is they're still young and developing. So what I would argue is they're probably in the same boat as Washington, Florida. They, in terms of their performance, I would estimate is that they're slightly overperforming this year, whereas Washington and Florida are slightly underperforming. And so in combination, that's where, like, I'd say they're probably about even, all similar chances at making the playoffs. And then going into next season, it's 51, 59, 62 or so million in cap spending. So lots of space and a decent team. They do have to re-sign a number of players, though. So that's going to eat up some of that cap. But, I mean, it's a decent team. Looks like they're at minimum a bubble team next year. And like I said, they have a shot at making the playoffs this year. But lots of people all competing for the same spots there. So we'll see. Buffalo, surprisingly, didn't really do anything in terms of additions for the trade deadline. So Stillman, Pick, Strand, Greenway maybe is their biggest pickup, but that's not that big of a pickup. And Pick, and so I mean they didn't really do anything around the trade deadline. They're 4 points back with 4 games in hand. So if they win all 4, that puts them ahead of both the Islanders and Pittsburgh. If they win 1 game, which puts them at the same games as Pittsburgh, they're still behind Pittsburgh, though. So really, Buffalo is probably similar position as the Islanders. Islanders have those wins in the bag, whereas Buffalo doesn't. So you still have to win to catch up. And it's not so easy necessarily. So for this season, I'd say Buffalo, I would, to be honest, again, I'm not so confident about Buffalo. I would put them in the exact same spot as Washington, Florida, Ottawa. All 4 teams all have a shot at taking the last playoff spot, or one of the last 2, or both of the last 2 if those other 2 teams drop out. So we'll see. And then for next season, 36, 56, 58, 63 about million in cap spending. So lots of space. Not really much to re-sign either. So if Buffalo does a lot of additions in the offseason, they could be a really competitive team next season. So long-term looking up this season, like I said, they're all right on the same bubble there. And so next, because it's only really, so if you take a look at the top teams there, they look in all likelihood to be locks in those top 3 for the Atlantic and Metropolitan. So I'll just talk about Pittsburgh and the Islanders separately, since they're kind of with this big pack of going for the wild card spots. So where are they here? So we got Islanders and Pittsburgh. So the Islanders did one big move and kind of a smaller depth move. So Bo Horvat, everybody knows about that trade. That's a lot of scoring that they're adding, and I think that's a great pickup for them. Engvall, I mean, he's a bit of a depth player. Maybe half a point per game, 15 some odd goals a season. So it's enough offense to add where, in theory, compared to the start of the season, they should be more productive, and their defensive capabilities are not in question. Awesome goaltending and all things considered, decent defense. So the ads they made make them capable of making the playoffs and even potentially doing well in the playoffs, I would argue. Believe it or not, I still have, in my opinion, them as one of the teams with a good shot at winning a cup. Might seem a bit crazy, but I feel very strongly that they're a good team. Now, just remember, in the past few years, they've been in the conference final multiple times. So, and their franchise has only improved really. So, and I'm just gonna go and show you, so that you know I'm not just making that up. All right, so they missed the playoffs last season, which I was very surprised about, but previous year conference final, year before that, second round, then missed the playoffs a couple seasons before that. And so, I mean, they're, as far as I would argue, a very good team, very good shot, at least to make the playoffs, but I think even to go deep. So if I had to predict, because they added in scoring that they needed, I think it's enough to get them over the hump to go into the playoffs. I think, well, what's their last 10? 4-3-3, not the best, but not horrible either. It's going to be a tough run to the playoffs, but I think they'll make the playoffs. I like their chances better than Buffalo, Ottawa, Florida, Washington. Of all those bubble teams, Florida, I think, maybe has the best shot at taking that spot. But the rest, I think the Islanders are better than all the rest of the teams, so I think the Islanders are in. But anyways, so for next season, 47, 67, 71, 76, 78 or so million in cap spending. So not much, but they could still technically add somebody if they wanted. So their roster is pretty unchanged for next season. But they do have Horvat for the long term. They extended Barzal. So, so their roster is not going to change much next year because they're going to have those new, well, at least Horvat. Next season, I'd say they're going to be better next season than this season. This season, I think they're going to make the playoffs. They'll probably be in the second wild card spot. I think they're going to be able to hold that spot and keep everybody else out. That's my prediction there. And but yeah, we'll see. And then next season, I think they're going to take a step up. They're probably going to be maybe third in their division or something like that. But we'll have to see after the off season as well. So, anyways, and then the last bubble team wild card spot is Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, what did they do here? So, got rid of Bluger, picked up Granlund, which I think was a very good pickup. That's going to give them some more offense. Bonino, more offense. Kulikov, more depth defensively. And so a relatively decent performing defenseman. Um, so they've added and not anything too crazy. So really, they're going to be similar performance to what they've done with a slight improvement. And especially, I would say so because of Granlund. So if I had to take a guess, I think it's the exact same thing as the Islanders. I think Pittsburgh's going to hold that spot. Of the two of them, I think Pittsburgh has the better chance at moving up into a third spot. I still don't see them dropping out because they've got enough of a gap in points right now, and similar number of games played. So I think it's going to stay exactly as is for the wild card spot in the East. Islanders, I think, are going to hold their spot, like I said. In Pittsburgh, I don't think they're going to drop below the Islanders. So I bet you anything it's a lock. And the only matchups that I think could change, matchups are actually going to be the same, I would say, in all likelihood. I don't see New Jersey skipping over Carolina. So really, the East looks pretty pretty locked up into what they already are. I'll speak more about the higher spots in a sec, but yeah. So in the wild card, I think it's going to be just locking up those last two spots. They're probably going to hold their ground, and I don't think anybody's going to move up. If anybody's going to, like I said, I think it's going to be Florida. I don't think the rest of the teams have enough experience, capabilities, and all that to be able to move up. So like I said, I think it's a lock, but if anything's going to happen, maybe Florida can take a spot. But I just don't see really much changing in the East, even though there's so many teams that are competitive there for that last, for those last couple spots. And I don't think I commented on Pittsburgh long run, so they've got 39, 59, 61, so lots of cap space to do stuff if they want. What they're going to do, who knows? Their team's getting a bit old, so interested to see what happens with them. But I think they'll be the exact same type of team next year. Granlund's got a couple years there. They have Russ, Raquel for a while, Malkin, Crosby still for a bit. So, I mean, Pittsburgh, well, if they do some additions, they could be a better team, but they're pretty much going to be one of those maybe third in their division, maybe second, or a wild card spot there in the long run, I think, or for next year maybe, but we'll see. So, yeah, like I said, I think those wild card spots are pretty much a lock, and then as a result, likewise for the divisional stuff here. So we'll start with, I think maybe the clearest division, because so if I think that those wild card spots are staying the same, then the Atlantic really is not going to have any changes whatsoever, except for maybe changes in position. Boston can't be moved, but between Toronto and Tampa they could flip, but they're still facing each other anyways. So we'll just talk about the teams quickly, given the additions that they made. So Tampa, Toronto, Boston. So Tampa made a couple moves, but more depth than anything. So Janot they brought in, and Esimont is a depth player. Janot's kind of like in the middle pack there. So just a couple depth players, no major changes really. So it's the same kind of team that's won the cup and got to the finals last year. So, I mean, they've got just that exact same potential this season. I mean, there's not really much more to say than that. They're Tampa Bay, and they got a shot at a cup this year, like they have all the past few years. So going into next year, a lot of people coming out, RFAs at least. So they've got 39, 50, 64, 65, 74, about 74 million in cap spending. So they've got a bit of space, but they have to re-sign Colton, Janot, Esimont if they do for him, maybe Killorn. So really, it's the same roster next year, and I mean, until anything major changes with their roster, they're going to be going for a cup every year. So good long-term outlook for next year and after that too. So good for them. Yeah, I was going to maybe go Boston next, but... And actually, I'll talk about that in a sec. So we'll just talk about Toronto. Now, as we all know, if you've been following around the trade deadline, Toronto's done a lot to change their team. So they've got O'Reilly, Achari, McCabe, Lafferty, Gustafson. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with Shen. So about 6 players coming in. Now, that is a massive chunk of their roster that has either changed or been slightly adjusted. So, for example, if it's a depth thing, so they pick up a guy and then some players that are currently playing move down the depth chart. But essentially all 6 are coming into play. And think about that. 6 of 20 spots are different for their team. That's a lot. What's 6 divided by 20? About 30% of their roster, their starting lineup, is different. So, yes, the one thing I'm going to say here is yes, they've improved, but is that too many changes? Are they going to be able to develop enough chemistry? Is that too many moving pieces to really mess up the team? Maybe prevent them from, like I said, having chemistry in the playoffs. I think it's a lot to change, and because a lot of the players have terms still, next season I think they're going to be more stable. But this season I'm concerned that it's not going to be a stable team. Yes, they've improved, and if everything goes well, they could be a team that could compete for the cup. But I really wonder how much all those changes are going to impact the team's cohesiveness, chemistry on the ice, things like that. So otherwise, I mean, I'm not so confident in their defensive capabilities. Yes, they can score, but I really question if the combination of their defense and goaltending is good enough to get through Tampa to start, and then Boston or whoever else they go against next, and then whoever else they go against after that. I have Tampa and Boston ahead of them. Yeah, they improved, but I really question if they can do it this year still. So, anyways, I think they're going to, like I said, I think they're not good enough to beat Tampa or Boston. And then even if they do, even if they get past them, I don't see them then getting past a Rangers or whoever else gets out of the Metropolitans. So I didn't even have them making the playoffs this season, which I was wrong, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't. Maybe it's because I don't like the Leafs, but I just don't think. I think they made good additions. I just don't. I think it doesn't feel right. I don't think they have it. But we'll see. I could be proven wrong. Uh, Long term, or at least to next year, lots of movement coming out of the roster. They are spending 44, 50, 62, 63, 68, 74, about 74 million in cap spending. So they have some space, but look how many people are going to drop out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 potential people dropping out of their lineup. So what are they going to do next season? Like I said, they have, I think, a better established core from the moves they made this season, but yeah, they still have a lot to fill out, and that's a lot of people coming in. So what's going to happen to them next season? Is it going to be the same thing that I'm arguing for this season, where there's too much movement? I don't know. It's hard to say, but yeah, I don't think Toronto's going to get, if they can win a round. That's a possibility. Beyond that, I don't think they're going any further than maybe a round, if that. And they have to get past Tampa in all likelihood. So they have a shot. If they can get to the conference final, they have a shot at winning a cup. But getting to the conference final, I think they've got too many teams that are better than them ahead of them. So, but we'll see. Boston. So this is, I think, a better example of what you're going to do with additions. So Toronto added, 6 players? Boston added 3, if I'm not mistaken. So Hathaway, Orlov, Bertuzzi. So 3 players added. Orlov's done outstanding so far. Hathaway's a depth player. Bertuzzi's probably going to be a depth player. He could be impactful, but hasn't played that well as of late. So they've been so good so far this season. They've got the injury to Hall, which is not long term, but not short term either. Could be up to the playoffs. They're going to have all these people hopefully healthy come the playoffs, and they're already so good. So I mean, Boston's got a heck of a shot. Now, I think so people might disagree with my assessment here, but I would argue that they've overperformed compared to what they should have done with what they have. I think they're just on a roll. So people might be thinking that they're going to be the best shot at winning a Stanley Cup. I don't feel necessarily that's the case. I think they're one of the top teams, but I had them in the same boat as Tampa Bay. To be honest, if they face the Islanders, I think the Islanders could upset them. Pittsburgh could upset them. They're not, I was going to say that they're not better in terms of roster composition than Pittsburgh and the Islanders. Pittsburgh, I'd say they're probably even with Pittsburgh. I like the Islanders roster set up better, but with the additions in Boston, that's where, to be honest, I could see an upset with the Islanders. I could see an upset with Pittsburgh. I don't think it's in the bag for Boston getting out of the first round, depending on who they face. So everybody, I know they've had an awesome season, and that's great. It's a record-breaking season so far. I mean, maybe I'm thinking too much, but I could easily see Boston losing in the first round, as surprising as that sounds, depending on their matchup. I think the Islanders are best suited to beat Boston because the Islanders are good defensively. And if you go back, what was it, a couple years ago, they beat a similar Boston team. So they beat Boston in the second round 4-2, and I watched that whole series, and Boston was really, really good, and the Islanders were just better. So if I were the Bruins, I would want to face Pittsburgh. If they're facing the Islanders, that's going to be a really tough series, in my opinion. So don't think that Boston's a lock to get out of the first round because those wild card spots are decent teams. I really caution people to not underestimate Pittsburgh and the Islanders. So we'll see what happens, of course. I mean, they're on a massive roll. They're a great team. 8 losses. 8 losses through 61 games. That's unreal. And we'll see what happens. But, yeah, like I said, don't think it's so easy for them to get out of the first round because it won't be. It definitely won't be. And then that's not even talking about the next round if it's Tampa or Toronto. So if you're predicting Boston to win a cup, it's not so easy. And then, yeah, otherwise next year, lots of people coming out. Bergeron might come back, might retire depending on what happens. Krejci, same thing. Boston next year might not be that great of a team depending on what they keep and what they lose. So we'll see what happens. But so that's 28, 65, 71 in cap spending next season. So they can fill out the roster still, but they don't have that much money available, all because of that Pasternak contract. So if any year is the year for Boston, they really hope they got to hope that they can do something this year, because I think they're not going to be as great next year, but we'll see. Yeah. So anyways, I think that's enough for the Atlantic. Essentially, who gets out to the conference final out of that, I think it's anybody's game. I think it's really close. It's going to be so competitive. All right, and then we've got Metropolitan. We have Rangers. Where are the Rangers? Rangers, New Jersey, and Carolina. So again, similar to Toronto, we all know what happened with the Rangers for their trades. So they picked up, where is it here? So Tarasenko, Mikkola is a depth player. Mott, not that impactful. Kane. So it's basically 2 major moves. So not too much to mess around with the chemistry and all that. So smart in that regard, I think, at least. And the players they brought in are fantastic players, so they'll fit in easily. So for them, of all teams, maybe that could slip out of their spot. They could maybe lose their spot to because they've got Pittsburgh and Islanders both potentially coming up there, and there's too much of a gap between the Rangers and New Jersey. So I don't see that flipping. And yeah, so I mean, I would argue they're probably a lock. I don't think Pittsburgh's going to take their spot, and I don't think the Islanders will either. So Rangers are pretty much there. They're going to face Carolina or New Jersey in all likelihood. Who that's going to be, it's hard to say. Um, but yeah, they're in their spot there. I'll talk about matchups after I go through the other two teams there. Um, yeah, so some short term great moves I think to help them compete for a cup. Next season, 39, 59, 61, 66. About 66 million in cap spending. No major signings to make. So they've got a lot of money that they can spend. Could maybe keep Tarasenko, Kane potentially. They got lots of space to do that, and it's still going to be a competitive team next season, I would argue. So they didn't really get rid of anything important, and everybody's locked in. So the Rangers, they're going to be competitive for a while, in my opinion, until their players start to age. So like they got at least 5 years probably of being a competitive team. So yeah, so long-term outlook good, short-term outlook for Rangers pretty good as well. New Jersey. So really the only pickup is Meyer, and that's about it. So they're not messing around with the chemistry much, which is a good thing because they've had really good chemistry this season. I won't speak about the first round matchup yet. We'll just talk about their long-term outlook. So short-term, I mean, they're probably going to hold their spot, maybe flip with Carolina. We'll see. But yeah, long-term, 23, or at least for next season, I should say. 41, 45, about 45 million in cap spending, so lots of space. Lots of people to re-sign though, so that's going to get eaten up very quickly. But in all likelihood, next season probably a similar roster. Probably, I would guess, similar performance because now they've had a year together and chemistry is going to improve and things like that. So I think next year, New Jersey, probably similar performance. Maybe a minor step back because I think they're slightly overperforming this season. But similar performance is what I would expect for next season. Yeah, and then we'll talk about first round in a sec here. Carolina, they didn't really do much. So Jesse Puljujarvi. Anyways, it's a tongue twister for me to get out, but they picked up him and Gostisbehere. So very small changes, which is, again, I think a good thing. Don't want to mess around with chemistry too much, and their roster's pretty good as it is. I won't quite yet talk about their rest of their outlook for this season because I want to talk about all three teams together. But for next season, 33, 53, only 53 million in cap spending. But they have a chunk of players coming out. So we'll see what happens with them. I think their core is very good though, so expect similar performance next season. They'll probably take a step back though. I think they're not going to be as good next year. but we'll see. It could be similar, slightly worse performance, but like I said, we'll see. So I think it's easiest to talk about the Metropolitan as a group of the top three. So again, if anybody's going to drop out, I think it's going to be the Rangers into a wild card spot. I think it's unlikely because of the gap in points. And the teams, Pittsburgh Islanders, I think they're going to stay in their spots, but I don't think they're going to move up. I think they're just going to hold water to get to the playoffs. So from there, Carolina and New Jersey could flip. It's hard to say because they have similar games played, similar points, so it's hard to know who's going to go where. People might think I'm crazy for this prediction, but I have a very strong feeling that New Jersey's not going to make it past the first round. So if New Jersey plays the Islanders or Pittsburgh, I don't think they're going to pass them. I think both teams are better suited for the playoffs. New Jersey's too young, and I just don't think they're going to be able to get through a round. If they do, I don't think they can go further than one round. So if it was if New Jersey finishes in the top of the division, I think they have a better shot at beating Pittsburgh and the Islanders. Do they have a better shot? That's hard to say. Because in all likelihood, it's going to be, I know, but maybe even that might change. So I don't know who's going to be the wild card spots. And so I can't even really predict who the teams are going to play against. So I think between Carolina and New Jersey, Carolina's got a better shot at going deep. I think New Jersey's they can maybe get through a round, probably won't get through two. If it's Carolina, New Jersey in the second round, then New Jersey might go through. But I don't think New Jersey's, if it's New Jersey against the Rangers, Pittsburgh Islanders, I don't think they're going to be able to beat both the Rangers and one of those teams. So I don't see New Jersey having a shot at a cup. Carolina, I would put in a similar spot. They have the chance to beat somebody in the first round, but I can't see them being good enough to go through two rounds. So, to be honest, in my opinion, it's probably the Rangers and one of the wild cards coming out of the Metropolitan in the Metropolitan final. I don't see Carolina or New Jersey, but if anybody's going to, it's going to be Carolina. So, anyways, so that's kind of my thoughts on it. Rangers have a really good shot at a cup, in my opinion, even if they struggle up till the playoffs. And I think the wild card spot's going to take one of the other spots for the division final. So it's maybe a bold prediction, but I'm more confident in the wild card spots than New Jersey. At the very least, Carolina. Like I said, Carolina of the two teams is good enough to get to the conference final, in my opinion. But yeah, we'll see. Carolina's got more experience too. New Jersey has essentially no experience. So that's the big difference between the two, I think. So, so just to go over the whole conference, what I think is going to happen is it's going to be if Boston plays Pittsburgh, they go through. If Boston plays the Islanders, I think the Islanders might upset them. Tampa's going to beat Toronto, in my opinion. And then from there, either of the two, they could go all the way to the final. Don't know. Metropolitan, like I said, depends on the matchup. If it's Carolina Rangers, I think the Rangers go through. If it's Carolina Pittsburgh, Carolina probably would win. If it's Carolina Islanders, I like the Islanders. So there's a lot of moving parts there. New Jersey Rangers, I think New Jersey loses. New Jersey Pittsburgh maybe could beat Pittsburgh. New Jersey Islanders, I think they'd lose to the Islanders. So it all depends on matchups out of the East. And then going through, Rangers have a shot. Boston, Tampa, I think Pittsburgh even, Islanders. So there's lots of teams with opportunities to win a cup out of the East. I think the East is extremely strong. Everybody already knows that, but I think they're the... I was going to say favorite to win a cup, but they're going to be good. I would say there's clearly more teams with potential to win the cup coming out of the East. So in all likelihood, an East champion, but we'll see. So now I'll talk about Nashville and Calgary. See, this one's tough. Yeah, I'll talk about Nashville, Calgary, and Winnipeg because I think they're all kind of in a similar... do I? The West is so even that it's like... I'll just talk about Calgary and Nashville first, and then we'll talk about the rest after. So Calgary... And where's Nashville? So I think both Nashville and Calgary are equally capable of taking a wild card spot. But they're behind by enough points where they really, they got to do something quick. So, hi, Crystal. Thanks for tuning in. So Nashville, as we saw, they got rid of players from the deadline. So they got rid of Niederreiter, Janot. They picked up Barry, but that's more of a flip with Ekholm, and then really Asplin's not that impactful. So I think Nashville is kind of waving the flag. I don't think they'll be able to make the playoffs. They're out by too much, and they've dropped players. So not looking too good from what they did going into or going past the deadline here. So I would argue in all likelihood not going to make the playoffs, but of course we'll see. They do have a good track record historically though, but they have the injury with Johansson, I think it was, with the cut to his legs, so I just don't see it happening for Nashville. For next year, 24, 49, 56. Uh, 65, about 65 in cap spending. They have some people to re-sign, but nothing too significant. So, similar roster next season. Lots of cap space. They could easily move into a playoff spot next season. So their outlook for next year is not so bad. We'll see what happens, though. But yeah, for this season, I would say it seems unlikely to make the playoffs. Calgary, again, they did nothing really. So Hunt for Sahorna, Nick Ritchie, and Troy Stetcher. They're not improving their team that much, so it's the same roster. Could of the two teams, I think maybe Calgary could take a wild card spot, but it almost seems like the West is locked for the wild card spots as well. Of course, we'll see. Winnipeg, they're not doing so well. We'll talk about them in a sec, but so Calgary could come up, maybe take Seattle's spot, maybe take Los Angeles's spot. So they got a shot still, but they still have a lot of work to do. Next season, 46, 78. Did I do that math right? 60, 78. So they're nearly at their cap already for next season, and there's no, they have some people leaving and they got to fill out the roster still. So it's basically the same team going into next season. I see them as having really underperformed this season, so expect them to improve next season, probably be into a playoff spot. The exact same roster, no real changes. But things aren't going so well this season, and of the two teams, Calgary, Nashville, to take the final wild card spot, I could see Calgary doing it. I doubt Nashville, and but really, it's probably going to stay as is unless somebody from the rest of the spots really tanks for the rest of the season. So, but we'll see. Next, we'll talk about. We'll do Pacific, and I'm going to talk about Vegas, Los Angeles, Seattle, and Edmonton all together because I think they're all kind of in one big block there for the Pacific. So we've got Seattle, Los Angeles, Edmonton, Vegas. Okay, so Seattle, if I'm not mistaken, they did nothing. Yeah, they picked up Magna. So they really did nothing for the trade deadline. So they're kind of going with what they have. I'm not confident. I didn't think they'd make the playoffs, so I have no confidence in them doing anything in the playoffs. The conference is quite weak. So it's not, I mean, in theory they could win the first round, but they might not even make the playoffs. It could be Calgary comes in, Seattle goes out, Calgary comes in, LA goes out. But so Seattle's not so certain that they're in a playoff spot. No additions, and I don't think that team's that great, so we'll see. For next season, 49. About $62 million in cap spending, it looks like. So lots of space still. Let me just make sure my math is right. So 37, 47, 50, 56, 61. Yeah, about 64. So they've got lots of cap space. They got some people to re-sign though, so it's not so. It's not perfectly representative, but pretty close. Not too much to sign. So next season they could do as good as they did this season. But if I had to predict, they're going to be a bubble team, if anything. Next season easily could miss the playoffs. So we'll see. But again, what I'm gonna do is talk about this whole division as a chunk. So I won't really talk about how they'll do in the playoffs yet. We'll wait. So LA, again, I don't think they really made any. I think it was just Gavrikov and then a change in goaltending, right? So Gavrikov, Korpisalo, and that's basically it. So more or less going with the same team. Add a defenseman maybe, and that's about it. It really so. I mean, not that fantastic of a team in my opinion, but we'll talk about how they'll do these playoffs in a sec. For next season, 41, 63, 65, 69, about 69, 74 million in cap spending. They've got a few people to re-sign. And I mean, not that great of a team. So same kind of thing as Seattle. Could easily next season be on the outside looking in. Equally bubble team, maybe in the same spot. It's a weak Western Conference, so they got a bit of flexibility to make it in, but not that strong of a team. Okay, so yeah, we'll talk about Edmonton next. So Edmonton picked up Ekholm, got rid of Barry. So that switch is probably better off for Edmonton, but I think they gave up a lot to get Ekholm. Bugstad is more of a depth player to pick up Puljujärvi's spot. So really, it's not much of a change. Essentially, what I would say is that they fixed their defensive gap that they needed to fix from picking up Ekholm. So it's very small number of trades or changes, but I think it's a big change to the team in the end. Again, we'll talk about the team in their division in a sec. First, we'll talk about the long-term outlook here. So for next season, 43, 65, 66, 73, about 75 million in cap spending. So not much space. So a similar team next season. Just going to be depth players that they add. So it's basically the exact same team next season. Since I'm going to talk about my expectations this season in a sec, and they're the same as what I think for next season, we'll hold on that for a sec. Next up, Vegas. They, of all teams coming from the Pacific, made the most significant changes. So they've got Barbashev coming in. Bluger, not a major impact, but something, a depth player, and Quick as a depth goalie. So I like those moves for Vegas. I think they fixed what they needed to, and having seen that Stone is supposed to be able to play in the playoffs, I think this team's going to be quite good. Similar to Edmonton, I think next season, same kind of performance as this season, and I'll talk about that in a sec. And so in terms of financially, that's 36, 50, 36, 56, 64, 74, 79, so about 79 million in cap spending, so pretty much right at the cap. But like I said, similar team next season as this season, and we'll talk about that now. So in my opinion, we've got Edmonton, Vegas, and then the rest are not going to be impactful. So if Calgary makes the playoffs, I think they could win a round or two. But they're really struggling, so they might not even make the playoffs. So in the first round, so in the first round, I would, if I was to predict, it's going to be Vegas, Edmonton, first and second spot. Interchangeable more or less, I think, in the end. And so I see Vegas coming out of the first round and Edmonton coming out of the first round. So I think it's going to be, and no matter how the spots sort out, unless it's Edmonton, Vegas in the first round, which seems unlikely, but it could happen. But I anticipate Vegas, Edmonton, the top two spots. Vegas wins the first round. Edmonton wins the first round. And then they play each other. From there, I think it could be a coin toss, but I favor Edmonton. But Vegas is it's a really strong team. So out of the Pacific, it's Vegas and Edmonton all day, in my opinion. If Calgary gets in the mix, I could see Calgary beating Vegas, but I can't see them beating Edmonton. So so long as Edmonton, Vegas don't play, well, Edmonton I think is going through no matter what, unless they face Vegas and then it's a coin toss. I have Vegas over Calgary, but Calgary could in theory beat Vegas. But in all likelihood, out of the Pacific, it's going to be Vegas, Edmonton in the division final, in my opinion. And then for the Central, same story. I'll talk about all four teams at once here. So we want Winnipeg, Minnesota, Dallas. Where's Colorado? There they are. And so same thing as the Pacific. I'll talk about everything at once because it's so close between all the teams here. So for Winnipeg, I liked the moves they made for the trade deadline. I watched because the Jets are my favorite team. I don't follow them as closely as I used to, but I watched the press conference with Cheveldayoff, and the reporters were really giving him a hard time about a lack of moves, but I think he did a great job in my opinion. So Niederreiter's a great pickup in the top 6, and Nemesnikov as a depth player I think is very smart. So I really like what Cheveldayoff did. Again, we'll talk about this season, my outlook in a sec. We'll talk about next season first. So next season, similar team. Don't know what's going to happen with Dubois because he doesn't seem like he wants to stay there. Have a few signings they need to do, but for the most part, it's depth players. Spending, we've got 61, 67, 69. So they have a lot of cap space, it looks like. Depending on what happens, there might be some more eaten up from Dubois or whoever replaces. So they've got some cap space to do something in the offseason. So they could be a substantially better team next year versus this year. And they're not that bad of a team this year, but we'll talk about that in a sec. So long-term outlook looks decent. Short-term, and like I said, we'll talk in a second about that. Minnesota, they made a bunch of moves, which I thought was good for them. So they have some picks: Johansson, Nyquist, Sundqvist, and Klingberg. So some really impactful players. One impactful player and then some kind of middle of the pack players. So some decent pickups for them. I think they did really well considering what they gave up too. So again, we'll talk about this season in a sec. Long term, or next season, I should say. They have 33, 56, 59, 65, 66, about 66 million in cap spending. Again, some people to sign, but nothing too crazy. So they could make some good additions. Nobody overly critical leaving either. So I think Minnesota next year could be a much better team than this season. This season they haven't been that bad. So long-term outlook, I'd say, looks pretty decent for Minnesota this season. Again, we'll talk in a sec about that. Dallas, I don't believe, made too many moves. They picked up Dadonov, which I think was an improvement over Guryanov. Domi, I like that addition, and that's basically it. So I think they made good pickups there. So they're going to improve slightly. Again, we'll talk about outlook for them this season in a sec. Next season, 60, 75, about 75 million in cap spending. So close to the cap, but they still have enough to make an addition or two. But they have some expiring contracts. So really, it's going to be a similar team next season. And so expectations are going to be similar to what I'm going to say in a sec about them. Last, Colorado. I think they did a similar thing here to Boston. Yeah, I think Boston's probably most similar. So not too many major changes. They added Kincaid as a depth goalie, which was smart. Johnson, depth player. Eller, kind of middle. And that's about it, really. So just a couple little tweaks to round out the roster and give some depth, which was wise in my opinion. Again, we'll talk about my outlook for them this season in a sec. Next season, a lot of players going out, but their core still stays the same. 33, 50, 60, about 65, 66 million in cap spending next season. So lots of space, but lots of spots to fill. So what they do exactly... Oh, sorry, and... wait, I said 66, was it? 66. 73, sorry, because I forgot about Landeskog. So about 73 million in cap spending, and they have a lot of people to re-sign. So, and it's that McKinnon contract doubles, exactly doubles. So that's where all the spending goes. So next season, for that reason, I don't know if they're going to be as competitive because to round out the roster, they don't have much money to do it. So this is the problem about spending so much on one player. I never liked that signing, and I still don't like it. And so Colorado might not be so good next season. You can mark my words on that, but we'll see. So that's for next season. Now we can finally talk about this season for this division here. So Colorado, I think, is the standout. They'll probably finish at the top of their division. If they don't, whoever they face in the first round, they'll get by. Even if they finish in the top spot, the only way in which they can't get past the first round is if they face Vegas, where it would be a close matchup where I still would favor Colorado, but it's almost a coin toss, likewise with Edmonton. So as long as Colorado, Vegas, and Edmonton don't face any of each other, they're all going through the first round at least. They're all going through the first round. So those three are going to, in all likelihood, two of them are going to go deep. They're probably going to be the conference final, in my opinion. So depending on, because Central, I think, is really in flux, Pacific, same thing. So where all the spots line up, I have no idea. It's hard to say. Winnipeg, Dallas, and because of Minnesota's additions, all three, I would say, are in the exact same spot. Dallas, I like more than LA. So Dallas, Minnesota, and Winnipeg, I like all three more than LA and Seattle. Calgary, if they make the playoffs, I would have them in the exact same group. All could go deep, but I think they're going to eventually get eliminated to one of the powerhouses in the West. So I see Colorado, Vegas, or Edmonton, some combination of those three, two of those three, probably in the conference final. And then whoever goes through to the final, it's hard to say. But my pick would be Edmonton. If you saw my picks for the Stanley Cup final yesterday, I predicted at the beginning of the season for Edmonton Islanders final. I'm still sticking to that. I think Colorado's going to have a Stanley Cup hangover. They might get to the conference. They probably will get to the conference final, but I bet they're going to lose to Vegas or Edmonton, whoever gets through. So in the end, Colorado, Edmonton, Vegas are my three picks to be potentially in the final. Going back to the East, Boston, Tampa, Islanders, Pittsburgh, I would put in the most likely to be in the final. Carolina, Toronto, I would put in the next group. They could easily be in the final as well. Or sorry, did I miss somebody there? So Rangers, Boston, Tampa. Yeah, so Rangers, Boston, Tampa, Pittsburgh, Islanders, all of them could be in the final. Pittsburgh is the only one where I would say is less likely, but they still are really close. And then in the next group, you could maybe put Pittsburgh with them, Toronto, Carolina. So it's really wide open, I think, in the East. But my biggest favorites, I would put Islanders, Boston, Tampa, and Rangers. So it's really tough because there's four. And then whoever comes out in the final, who knows? So in the end, I think the simplest way to put it is it's not about all the moves you made. I think it's about having a good core. And I think maybe even making, like I said, with Toronto, too many moves could probably hurt you in the end. So we'll see what comes out of it. Those are my teams. Like I said, Rangers, Boston, Tampa, Islanders, and maybe Pittsburgh out of the East. And then Colorado, Edmonton, Vegas out of the West. And who wins in the final? I mean, it's anyone's game when you put all those teams together. So it's really hard to say. But like I said, I'm standing by my prediction. Islanders, Oilers final. And then if I had to choose, I would choose Edmonton. But it is so close between Edmonton and the Islanders, in my opinion, that I can't predict that. So anyways, I think that concludes everything. And like I said, I think the biggest point that I'm trying to make is trade deadline doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win a cup from what you do, and it might even hurt you. We'll see what happens in Toronto's case because they made the most moves. But yeah, I think it's better if you got good chemistry, let it go through and see what happens. But it's going to be, I think it's like I said, I think who is currently in a playoff spot is probably going to make the playoffs. The only change I think will probably happen, I have a feeling Calgary is going to come in and LA or Seattle is going to come out. That's my prediction. Outside of that, everybody else remains the same. And then the people that go through are the ones that I predicted already. So those are my thoughts right now. I'll do predictions once we get to the playoffs and all the matchups are certain. Also, just so you know, I might as well tell you now about the plan. I'll do, what do you call it? Previews, I guess you'd call it, of all the matchups and my predictions at the same. Well, so I'll do previews and then I'll do predictions at the end there. But just know that those are coming up once playoffs start. Yeah, and that's about it. So if you like the stream, hit the like button, share with your friends, subscribe, turn on notifications. Otherwise, channel homepage has upcoming streams. Should be 2 p.m. Eastern daily, except for Sundays for this coming week. There is a time change for the Eastern time zone, though. So once that time change happens, which I believe is next Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, from there onward, it's going to be 3 p.m. Eastern daily. So just be mindful of that. So that's an adjustment there. But I'll remind you guys throughout the week coming up to that. So anyways, and any comments, leave them in the comments, and suggestions likewise. And once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you Monday. I have 3 topics that I have planned for next week that are going to be interesting. Just need to verify that I can, in fact, cover them, because they rely on me gathering data that might not exist. But there were 3 really interesting subjects. I'm at least going to talk about them if the data is not out there. But if it is, then I'll actually be able to quantify it, which would be really cool. So just stay tuned into early next week. Really interesting subjects, in my opinion. I have some hypotheses that I want to take a look at that, in theory, could completely change strategy in the NHL, but we'll see. I have to see that the data is available, publicly available, and that I can use it. So anyways, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. See you guys Monday.